Greetings! I'm Reverend John O'Toole, and today we're going to be working on building your own computer, part 3. And you might remember me from the Fairy Speak. I have had a bit of a hiatus for about 3 months for some health issues, but I am back and I have so much ideas to do. I don't have the time to shoot them all. But today, we're working on building my video editing computer out of new parts instead of used parts. Now, there's nothing wrong with building out of used parts, as long as you can get some that are reliable and are going to serve you the way you wish. So, our first step is going to be the motherboard. Now, the motherboard is what the CPU, which is the brains of a computer, interfaces with so it can connect to the outside world. So this is the motherboard that I chose. I like Gigabyte. I like its reliability. There are other motherboards out there that you might like. But I've been happy with Gigabyte, and I know a lot of my friends are happy with it. So this is the Gigabyte 7 Z390 gaming computer. Now, as much as you hate to save things, you should save the box for the motherboard. Everything that you don't use in this build, you're going to store in the motherboard box, including a little cap that comes off where the motherboard is. And I could find a useful place to put it. It's right on here. And then I can put all my parts down there. So this here is the motherboard. And there's plastic on it. Keep things tidy. Now, this particular CPU comes with a back plate. This back plate is going to insert into the back of the cabinet. Now, every time you get a motherboard, it should include the back plate. They're not interchangeable unless it's the same model and you're building a bunch of the exact same computers. So if you order a used one off of eBay, make sure it's coming with a back plate. Otherwise, you're going to have holes around all your ports on the back of your case if it didn't come in with that. Now, right here I'll show you, essentially, this right here, this plastic cover is where the CPU is going to go. That cover comes off in a later step. These 4 slots over here are memory slots. Some boards only have 2 slots. This one has 4. This particular board can go up to 64. Maybe I'll just put these down. This could go up to 64 gigabytes of RAM. But you want a minimum of 16 to run Windows 10. It can run more or less, but you really want 16. You can get to 32, that's ideal, and even better is 64. This slot here is for the video card. Now this particular board, you can put 2 video cards in if you wish. But we're not going that route. If you want to run more than 3 monitors, you could install another video card and have 6 monitors running on your system. Or if you were building a miner, a electronic money mining, Bitcoin, something like that, you could install 2 GPUs, and then you could also, that would help with generating more computations on one computer. It's going to create more heat. Just be aware, it's great for the winter time, but it's not too good summer. Okay, now this slot over here is for a SSD. And then there is another slot over here for a second SSD. And if you're only installing one SSD, then you might want to just put it over in this location. Now, when you install an SSD, you're going to read your instruction manual for the board, but chances are it's going to take one of your ports, your SATA ports. So this one has 6 SATA ports on the board, and 2 of them are going to be taken up by your physical SSDs that are mounted on the board. But the advantage of it is it's faster. So we have 6 ports, and we're going to use 2 of them for the memory cards, and then we're going to have another one for the CD-ROM. So that's going to leave you with 3 left for external drives. Or not external drives, but storage drives. Now these other slots over here are for other boards. And these are smaller slots, and they can, there are boards that will fit in those. Like if you wanted to have more USB 3 ports on your machine, then you can install them here. Or if you want to put in a video card that's going to convert your camera over to a video input. Okay, and then around the board are other connectors, like this big connector over here. This is the power connector, the main power connector. And there'll be a large connector from your power supply that's going to go here. And then there's another power connector over here. And it's a good idea to plug the connector into that board before you install it into your case. And then you have other ports along here for other things, like all your switches that go on the front, your audio input, your USB port that's going to be on the front. And you could look it all up. It's written on the board, and you can also look it up on your manual, which is vital. This plug over here in the corner is where your power plug, your switch, your the access, the light's going to turn on when it's accessing the hard drive, your headphone jack, your microphone jack. So they all have purposes, and all you're going to do is look them up and see what they are. Now these memory slots, they have different colors. So when you're installing only 2 RAM sticks, you want to look in your manual and see what it prefers to be installed in. Some boards will say to only install them in the 2 gray slots first, and then the second pair would go in the 2 black, or the vice versa. So they would be numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, and they'd say install the first set. You're only going to have 2 sticks to go into slots 1 and 3, or 2 and 4. You got to look in your manual and see what it says. So I think I'm going to install my RAM over here first. My SSD. this essentially is how it comes. And when it arrives, it's going to have finger places on the plastic that you can grab the board with. So you don't touch the end that has the copper strips on. The little slot, you see the little slot? That little slot matches in the socket in the board. You don't want to flip it over, you don't want to force feed it. You just want to put it in there, and then it looks kind of like a diving board. Now, see, this one's got a nice heat sink that goes on, a nice heavy heat sink. Some don't have heat sink. There we go. Now, not the time for have fat fingers. There we go. We've got one already installed. Now you might take a look at these two boxes and say they look alike, but you have to look at the label. One says 2 terabytes. The other one says 1 terabyte. Well, actually it says 1024 GB, which is 1024 gigabytes. Okay, so then again, we're at our second one. We're going to install that one over here. Now you notice on the second position that's way over here, it doesn't have a heat sink on it. So it probably thinks it doesn't need one. Now this one over here is close to the CPU and the memory, and it wants to ensure that it sheds off all the heat. Okay, same thing, tiny little screw. Now you need a number 1 Phillips for this screw. If you use a number 2 on it, it's going to break. It's going to strip out the head if it even works. Same thing. You want to insert it. It's like a little diving board. And you're going to put it down, line it up. Now, something to note here is that there's 3 positions for this board. Now, depending on the length, it's going to go in one of the other positions. You're going to take the stud out. It has a slotted screw, and install it in one of these smaller slots if you have a smaller SSD. And I'm sure there's a reason why you would. Now, I suppose you're wondering what we're going to do next. Now, I'm wondering what we're going to do next. So what we are going to do is install our CPU. So there's a funny little handle here, and you push it down and you pull it off the hook, and then this little fancy cover comes up and you hinge the cover up just like that. Now there's a plastic cover in there. Don't take that plastic cover off right now. You want to leave that plastic cover on. And very important, don't touch the pins under the cover. The only thing that's going to touch those pins is your new CPU, which we have right here. Now you cut the seal. It's a good thing that you're cutting the seal, because if you just bought this from a vendor, you want to make sure that if you bought it brand new, you want to make sure it's brand new and nobody has broken the seal. Now, these manufacturers are kind of sometimes they're very elaborate with the packaging. This one's pretty simple, but like the i9, there's a really bizarre case for it. And here we are again. We've got it all sealed up in plastic. Again, you don't want to touch the bottom that has all the little pins. Now on this board, when you look at it, it's got 3 corners and 1 kitty corner. Well, actually, it looks like it's got 2 kitty corners. Now, when you drop this PC in, the CPU, again, you've got a spot that you can put your 2 fingers in and grab onto this circuit. You definitely don't want to handle this by anything other than its edges. Now there's a little dot on the corner, and that is going to line up just like that. There's an arrow on the board right here, and there's an arrow on your CPU. Don't try to force it in, and it should just fit right in there. And then you bring this down again. You make sure that your tab is in the slot. Just like that, the cover comes off, and you want to save this cover. Now, if you buy a used CPU and or a used motherboard, you're probably not going to get this cover with it off of eBay. But if you got a brand new motherboard and you're going to send it back to the manufacturer, they want this cover back on that spot before you send it back, and you're not sending it back with your CPU on it. You're only sending back the board. So, put that in the motherboard box. Like you could even put this case here in the motherboard box. Now I suppose you're wondering what we do next. Are you wondering? Well, now we're going to put the cooler on the board. Now we could install the memory on here at this point, but just so that I have more room with my fingers, I think I'm going to install the cooler. And I'm just going to clean up this top of the... I'm going to clean up just the top of this chip here. Get off any of my fat finger grease. Hardware kit. The fan. There's different kinds of coolers that you can install. There are like water-cooled coolers and oil-filled coolers and air coolers. Those are your three. Some CPUs, they come with a little fan and a little heatsink. But these bigger systems, the i7s, i5s, so it's got a piece of plastic on the bottom. We're going to leave that on until we're just about to install this. Now there's basically two chips you would install this on. You would install it on an Intel CPU or an AMD. That's all we have a choice of. Oh, and by the way, for the $30, $37 this thing cost, they give you this way cool screwdriver with a number 2 Phillips. It looks like a Craftsman, but it's not. But it's still a nice screwdriver, and you need it to install the cooler. They could say, go find your cooler. Depending on the configuration you have. So we are doing an Intel i7, and what they, so we're going to go with these instructions. This plate goes on the back of the board. It's got little foam pads on there so it doesn't damage the board. They give you some heatsink compound, which is nice of them. They give you enough springs if you want to install 2 fans, but we're only installing 1. And then we have all these brackets. So you want to look at the picture and see which ones you're going to be using. So these ones that look like a horseshoe go on the AMD. And then these 2 are going to be used on the Intel. And just to be sure, you look at the manual and say, yep, AMD uses the horseshoe ones. But first, we're going to install the bracket on the back. They give you a bunch of these standoffs. And they're actually set up with a knurling on them so that you can hand tighten them. You don't have to put them in with... Now in here in the manual it says number 8. We're going to do the studs that say number 8 on them. So you're going to go back to the beginning of the manual. And then you're going to look in here and there are going to be some short ones and some tall ones. The tall ones are number 8 and the short ones are number 5. Well, we're using the number 8s. There's nothing wrong with following instructions. So we're going to pull out these tall ones. We're going to put the short ones. Now this is where having 3 hands would be a useful thing. So on the back of the board, we are going to install, we got 3 holes, and you'll see that in the bracket. And according to this, the 11.5X series, There we go. So you're going to see the screw appear through that middle hole for me, because I'm using an 1151. See? There we go. See the plate on there? Okay, so we're going to take the screwdriver, and just like you're tightening up the bolts on your wheel and your car, you're going to go opposite corners. You're going to do it until they stop. There. Now, uninstall the brackets. Parallel to the memory. And in the U shape facing in. Just like that. I'm going to switch over to my magnetic. I've had this screwdriver for like 20 years. The cap is held on with a little bit of tape. The tip is somewhat magnetic. Now there's a little note, because this screwdriver has slots in it. So you can actually put it in 3 different positions. For the series I have, which is the 115 or 151, it's going to be in the right spot on both sides. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to do this. You just follow the instructions. Okay, so we have the other bracket. Same thing. Just make sure I got the hump is up. Yep, hump is up. So that screw. If you ever wanted to put in a AMD chip CPU, you would change over this hardware to the other brackets. There we go. And you're going to want to put it closer to the back of the computer. But we've got to put some heatsink compound. Now if I had I like to use like a rubber glove. Heatsink compound gets kind of messy. I'm just going to put a plastic bag over my finger so that I can spread this around. Carefully. Try not to goo it all over the place. Just really want it on the chip, the CPU. A little bit of tapping. There you go. Not too much, not too little. Be sure to find some place to put the gooey plastic, because you end up with a mess. Oh, there we go. Just like that. See that? Now the bracket's offset, as you can see, and I want to put it closer to the back of the case. It gives me more room to where my memory is installing, and it just goes right on those two mounting screws. And then you want to take this highly sophisticated screwdriver, drop it down, seats, there we go. And you just crank it in until it stops. And it just stops. It doesn't actually tighten up like a regular screw. Once it shoulders out, it's done. There. And look at that, we're like almost done with a computer. Now we have the fan. Now one of the things you want to do when you're building a computer is you want to take off these wire twist ties everywhere. Because the wire twist ties, they'll dry out, and now you've got a piece of metal floating around your computer. You're better off with using a tie. Now the other thing about the computer, about the fan, is the side here that has the things on it, the frame, that's going to be the side that goes inside. You would think that it's protecting you from sticking your fingers into the fan, but that's not quite true. So, and you want to blow the fan out of your case. You don't want to be blowing the heat into your case. And they give you 4 of them in case you want to install another set of fans on the other side. So there's a slot in the fan in the fins and you push them to the flip. There we go. Can you believe that we're almost done here? This is going to go over here. Just like that. And then take care of your cable management as you go, and it'll be easier for you. Check out that. Isn't that impressive looking? Hard to believe it's going to fit in the case. Now the thing is heavy. This is actually the best place to grab it, is to grab it by the heatsink, not by the bottom of the board. You don't want to get the oils from your hands onto the board. Okay. The only thing left now to install is memory. Where's my memory? Where is my memory? Now I've been watching this memory price for months and months. And on the that Super Monday, Amazon Super Monday, other sites were knocking things off. So I opted to order this memory, and in the back of my mind was that I was going to build a second computer. And I could still build a second computer. Take that 1 terabyte, but don't forget these Go Fast stickers, because these stickers that you have, they'll make your computer go faster just because you put them on your computer. So this memory got marked down by $25 or $30, so it seemed like it was a good time to me to order enough for 2 computers. And I was going to make my older computer to my daughter. But she wants a laptop. Go figure. So now this is just like with the SSD card. You've got a space. You want that space to line up with the slot on the board. Otherwise it won't fit. And you try it, you flip it over and you see, you're going to see that it's been offset. You're going to slide it into the 2 slots. There's a slot in the front and a slot in the back that the board slides into. Now some of this memory actually glows RGB. And then your whole computer will glow in the dark. If you're really into that kind of thing. You make sure you're lined up in the slot, and I was not lined up. That's why you want to do this very carefully. There we go. Now I see my slot is lined up with the notch. 2 fingers on each side, pressing down at the same amount of pressure. Now it's easier because they're all going to be the same. It's the first one that's the challenge. Next one, put it into the slot. By one end, get it into the slot. On the other end, I once blew up a motherboard by not putting this memory in correctly. It was not pretty, because that was back in the day. My motherboards were expensive. Not that this board isn't a little pricey. $130. But there are more expensive ones. Go fast, Vicar. Make sure it's in the first slot, the back slot. Now, memory its costs are coming down a lot. So say you want to only go to 16. You can save some money by going with 4 4s. That'll give you 16. But if you could go to 32 or 64 as your maximum, and later down the road you decide, oh, I want to go to 32. Now you've got to basically get rid of those 4 cards. You've got nothing to do with it. You could probably sell it on eBay. But you can buy one 16 gig card and put it in the spot. Read your manual, will tell you which one to put it in, and you're done. If you want 32, now you just get another 16. Which is what these are. These are 16 gigabyte cards. Back in my day, memory was so expensive. And you know what? We're done with prepping the board. Now, remember what I mentioned before about the power cables? You remember? Anybody out there remember? Shout it out if you don't. You can shout it out. What I mentioned was that there was one cable you want to install now, because it's kind of a bear to get to it. So over here on this side of the cable, there is these 2 cable connectors. It's an 8-pin and it's a 4-pin. Now, not all boards have an 8-pin and a 4-pin. Some just have a 4-pin. The older boards have a 4-board. You can get them, but so it doesn't hurt to look at the manual. If you didn't have a manual, like say you bought a board on eBay, you can go online and look it up. So I'm a little mystified because I have an 810 So the cables are marked PSU. That's for it's going to connect into the power supply. And then we have these pairs. Now they're split apart in case you have only a single 4-pin connector. I'm a little confused because I have 3 of them. But according to the instructions, like so, I'm a little confused about why there's an extra connector. And in actuality, the book doesn't show you the extra connector. Well, it does. So if you have a power supply that only has one 24-volt connector, which would be 4 pins in it, you would install it on this other side. If you have a power supply that puts out more 12-volt power, then you install it in this double one. It could be clearer. It could definitely be clearer. So here we are. We are up to the place of the case. So we're going to grab this by the... Now this thing is heavy now, for sure. By the heat sink, safest place to grab it. And now we're going to bring the case up. Put your side panels someplace where they won't get damaged. So this is the challenge. I need to put the camera somewhere where you can see it. And I could work on it. We're not actually far from powering it up. Can you believe it? Now, it doesn't hurt to stop your project and you'll work on it another day once you feel like you're getting tired. Now your case bag, the hardware that comes with your case, should have the screws you need to mount the motherboard to the case. That is if you got a quality case. Now if you cheaped out on the case, you never really know what you're going to get. I have a Corsair's, just like the memories Corsairs. Now the screws that have a really coarse thread to them, those are for your fans. But if you got a good quality fan, they probably shipped you with screws to mount your fans to it, as you saw in a previous video. So, it doesn't hurt to dry check the screws to make sure that the screw you're using fits the stud. Well, this one does. Alright, so in this case, the Corsair case has a post in the middle that has just a stud, and that purpose is so you can orient your board in the case while you're lining up to the other ones. Now I've done this with cases that don't have that post, and it isn't fun, let me tell you that much. So remember in the stage we put this cable in, this is where it's kind of tight if you wanted to put this in later. To feed this cable out, it's going to go over and down and out the hole in the back. Now there may not be the correct layout for your studs to match your board on your case, as it is with this one. So when you initially put in your screws, you don't want to put them in too tight. Just want to kind of loose fit them to get all your screws into place. like to have more than 5 screws holding the board in place, but it all depends on how they line up.
What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor?